All right. So, as he said, we are here from the Georgia Department of Education just to provide some insight on the eligibility evaluation process and then navigating IEPs for all students with disabilities, but specifically our students who are deaf or hard of hearing. And then Anne is here to talk about what you guys or what family members can do to really be active participants in that process. And we were going to see if you guys could put in the chat if you are a family member, an early intervention provider, a teacher. We just kind of want to know who is here so we know who we're talking to. And I'm going to wait so we can just see if I can see the chat on my phone. They do have access to the chat.
Look at Q&A.
Oh, I see one.
It looks like from the names, it looks like a lot of TOD and.
All right. I see some people answering in the Q&A, which is perfect. That works. The chat is not enabled at this moment. So the Q&A works if you can put your answer in there. All right, so we've got some speech and language, early Head Start, early intervention. Awesome. So you guys who are in early intervention are really integral to this process of transitioning kiddos from that birth to 3 to the public school system or to whatever program they're going to for schools. So we've got speech school, parent navigator, lots of speech and language pathologists and ABT people. That's awesome. All right, so we're gonna move on. I just was curious who all was here, but hopefully this will give you some information. If you're not a family member, that you can share with families, but also so you know how to be an active part of this process. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was eligibility. So when we talk about eligibility for special education, we often think, okay, the student has a disability, the student has a hearing loss, so of course they're eligible. But in the world of public education, that is not an automatic qualifier for special education. So the win is the student does have a disability. They've got a documented hearing loss. But we also need to know that that is impacting education. So a student will be eligible for special education when they have both a disability, documented disability, and there's evidence that that's impacting their education, or that the student is struggling or would struggle to make progress in areas without special education. So the who's part of this eligibility process. So this is going to be your parents, guardians, your family members, a teacher, a service provider. Any of those people can make a referral to special education and will be a part of the team for the eligibility. And then of course you'll also have a psychologist, a speech and language provider, or anyone who's working with the student. And then once the referral is made to your local education agency, so that's your school system. It could be a charter school, it could be a school district. We refer to that as the LEA, local education agency. That school system will decide if an evaluation is appropriate. So they'll look at, if you bring your audiological report and you say, my child has hearing loss, I would like for them to be evaluated. The school district will look at that. If they decide against evaluation, which is unlikely, they'll typically evaluate. But if they do, they'll give you a prior written notice saying, this is why we don't think your child needs an evaluation. If they do decide to evaluate, then they'll also give you prior written notice saying, this is why we are going to evaluate. And then they'll give you a consent to evaluate. So that consent to evaluate really starts that process of evaluation. They won't do any evaluation or any kind of assessments prior to you signing that consent to evaluate. This is similar if you're transitioning from Babies Can't Wait from the birth to 3 program into the school age program at 3 years old. You just start before they turn 3. So you'll have a transition meeting with the school system and they'll decide if they need to do any evaluations to determine if the child is going to be eligible for special education. If you're part of Georgia Pines and you aren't part of Babies Can't Wait, then you'll have to make that referral or ask for that evaluation yourself as a parent. It is helpful if you're part of Babies Can't Wait and Georgia Pines, so that way Babies Can't Wait can be a part of that transition process and they can provide their eligibility information and all the evaluations that they've done. So like I said, as part of the evaluation process, the very first step is that consent to evaluate. So nothing is going to happen without your consent. And you should be made aware of pretty much everything that's going to go on in the evaluation process. What assessments are they going to use? When are they going to see your child? If your child is not in school yet, then they may need you to bring them into the school setting to do the evaluation. If they are in a preschool or they're already in school, then they'll do the evaluation at the school. The first thing that they're going to do is hearing and vision screening as appropriate. Obviously, if you have a child that has a hearing loss, they're not going to do a hearing screening, but they will do a vision screening because we want to make sure that we aren't evaluating a child that has an undiagnosed vision loss or hearing loss and showing that they have some area of need when it's really just their hearing or vision. So don't be concerned when you see that. If the child does not pass that vision screening, then they'll ask for another vision screening. If they still don't pass, then they'll ask that you take them to an eye doctor and just get them checked. Maybe they need glasses. Once those things are passed, then they'll start the evaluation. Again, this is just to make sure that our evaluations are accurate. We don't want to evaluate someone who isn't able to hear or see, and we need to know that information. So part of the evaluation process is going to be observations of your child in their classroom. If they are not in school, then they may do a home observation or have them come in and do a play-based observation. Different types of observations. We just want to see how they're performing or how they're doing around other people in different environments. We'll do checklists. So this may be behavior checklists or how does your child listen in certain environments when they're at home, when they're in the grocery store. All kinds of checklists that go to the parents, maybe go to the teachers. Informal and formal assessments. So they're going to do assessments depending on what the areas of need are. They may do intellectual functioning. They may do social emotional skills. They'll do obviously listening skills. And then work samples. If they are in a classroom, they want to look at their work samples. How are they performing in the classroom and more. And these are completed by team members, including the parents. So you should be a part of this evaluation process. You should be able to give some information. Be prepared to provide some insight on how your child is functioning at school, outside of school, with their family. Like I said, in the grocery store, on the playground, really any observations that you have are appropriate to bring to this process. And once all that's completed, the team will have an eligibility meeting to review the results of the evaluation and as a team, determine if the student or child is eligible for special education services. And so again, you are a part of this process. Whether you're an early intervention provider, you may be asked to come and share information, but if you're a family member, you're a definite member of this team and your input is very valuable. So know that you're a part of this, this whole process. And the team has to decide and agree on this eligibility, whatever the eligibility category may be. So in Georgia, these are the eligibility categories for special education, and you can be eligible in more than one category. So just because your child has a hearing loss and may be eligible for deaf, hard of hearing, they may also be eligible for speech language impairment, or they could also be eligible for intellectual disabilities, or really any of these categories. You can have, like I said, more than one. Now, some of them, it's appropriate to wait and reevaluate later on once the child has had services or had opportunities to learn more language, show what they know in the school system before they're evaluated. We also typically, if you have a child that is going to transition in at 3 years old, from the ages of 3 to 9, we may give them the eligibility category of significant developmental delay. And this just kind of shows that they have some delays in areas, whether it be social emotional or cognitive. It could be speech that we want to watch, but we don't want to necessarily give them one of the other categories. They can have that SDD or significant developmental delay category until this school year that they turn 9. And so once they turn 9, they would need to be reevaluated and given another category, or just be eligible under deaf, hard of hearing eligibility, and that's fine. So like I said, a child can be eligible in more than one category, and also a child who's eligible in any of these categories is eligible for any special education services. So just because I have a student who is only eligible for deaf, hard of hearing does not mean that they can only get deaf, hard of hearing services. They could get a co-taught setting or resource setting in core academics, so reading resource or math co-taught under that eligibility category. They don't have to have another area to get more services. So once you get an eligibility category, you're eligible for anything in special education. So I just wanted you to see the definitions, and these are IDEA's definitions, specifically for deaf, hard of hearing. And IDEA still calls it hearing impairment. Georgia changed it to deaf, hard of hearing. But as you can see, deafness means a hearing impairment that is so severe that the child is impaired in processing linguistic information through hearing with or without amplification that adversely affects a child's educational performance. Hearing impairment, or in Georgia, deaf, hard of hearing, means an impairment in hearing, whether permanent or fluctuating, that adversely affects a child's educational performance, but that is not included under the definition of deafness in this section. So in Georgia, we put these two eligibility categories together. So we have deaf / hard of hearing, because it doesn't really impact your educational opportunities if you are under deafness or you're under hard of hearing. You get the same services, you get what you need, or what the child needs. And so IDEA says any impairment in hearing. So we really want to make sure that we're looking at that and that we are evaluating if the hearing loss impacts education. So as you can see, it has to adversely affect a child's educational performance. And that's where that evaluation piece is so crucial. So again, these are current requirements for Georgia to start the evaluation process or be used in the evaluation process and then be eligible. And I just want you to understand this so that you know when a child is about to be evaluated, what should you bring to the table? What does the parent have? What does the family need to be asked to bring to the table? So the first thing that they need to have is an audiological report. This is supposed to be updated annually. If you haven't been to an audiologist in a year and 3 months, go ahead and give that to your school or to your LEA. Give the most recent document that you have, because that is documentation of that hearing loss. And then the school can move forward while you're working on getting an updated report. It's helpful to have an updated report because we want to know how the child's functioning at the time of the evaluation. The otological evaluation, if you have never been to an ENT or the child's never been and had an otological evaluation, the school system should still move forward with that evaluation and work on getting the child to the ENT or to the otological evaluation. It says it needs to be done within 90 days of eligibility, but we're not going to hold up or take back an eligibility just because we haven't had that in 90 days. We're going to work our best to get them in as soon as possible. And that really protects the child to make sure there's not something else going on if they've never had that evaluation. Psychological evaluation is recommended. So if we have a 3-year-old coming in and their only concern is that they have a hearing loss, it may not be appropriate to do a full psychological evaluation at that time. And so we may make them eligible for deaf, hard of hearing. And then if down the road we find that there are other areas of concern, we would then do a full psychological, so reevaluation. Sometimes it's not appropriate to do that full psychological because it's not going to give you accurate information. You may be testing a language delay and not really the IQ. However, down the road, or even when they're 3, if it's appropriate and there are some areas of concern, it is a good idea to go ahead and have that full psychological so that you can have information that's needed to help the team create that IEP and to be able to better serve that child. If there's a processing delay or short-term memory impairment, or really anything that's going on in addition to the hearing loss, it's really important to know that so that you can support that child or the team can support that child to the best of their ability. It may not add an eligibility, but it does give you really good information. And then the second part is the comprehensive educational evaluation or assessment. So this is that educational impact piece. And this is where there really should be a deaf, hard of hearing teacher on the team as a part of the evaluation, because this is the information that they should be able to get relative to the deaf, hard of hearing eligibility. So they're going to look at academic or achievement. They're going to look at receptive and expressive language and communication. And of course, this should be done in conjunction with a speech and language pathologist. They'll have assessments that can look at this. And then they're going to look at social and emotional functioning. So again, this could be a checklist. This could be observations, looking at how does the child interact with peers in a small group setting in the classroom or in the lunchroom or on the playground. We really want to look at how that hearing loss is impacting their social and emotional development. And then also looking at observations related to classroom functioning, but not just classroom. We want to look at how they're functioning in the gym for PE. Can they hear their PE coach calling out exercises? Can they hear their friends talking to them when they're just in that noisy environment of, say, the cafeteria? So we really want to make sure we're looking at all areas that the hearing loss may be impacting. And so we would write that up into an evaluation report as a team. And then we would decide, yes, it's impacting education, or no, it's not. If it is, then the child would be eligible for special education under the eligibility category of deaf, hard of hearing. Like I said, they could have other eligibility categories in addition to deaf, hard of hearing, but for the purpose of today, we'll look at just deaf, hard of hearing. So we've decided as a team that the child is eligible for deaf, hard of hearing. This could be a 3-year-old, this could be a 7-year-old, whenever it's determined that they're eligible. So what's going to happen next? So at that same meeting or potentially a meeting shortly after, the team will come together and draft an individualized education program, so an IEP. And this is the document that will show your child's present levels of performance and also lay out what specially designed instruction and services are needed to make sure that your child is making progress and can access their education. So we'll also include accommodations and modifications. We want to make sure that they are able to make progress academically and functionally. And for us in the DHH world, that functional piece is really important because we don't just focus on core academics. We focus on preparing a child for life after school. We want to make sure that they're ready for independent living, that they're ready to talk about their hearing loss and understand how to manage it and work with other people in that area. We want to work on career skills. There are areas we'll talk about in a minute, but just know it's more than academic readiness. And then once the team completes the IEP, the parent or family member will sign a consent to place the child in special education services. They'll receive a prior written notice and the student will start receiving those supports and services. Once that consent for special education services is signed, it is good for the rest of the child's career. So they will continue receiving services unless you as a parent decide that you, for some reason, do not want them to receive special education services, at which point you would have to sign a consent to revoke services. But you will only sign that consent to place one time. Annually, you will sign that you agree with the IEP, but the consent to place is just one time. So what are the components of the IEP? And this is just a really short overview of the IEP or Individualized Education Program. But this is the things that you as a team member or as preparing the family need to be aware of and understand that these will be discussed at every IEP meeting. So the first thing the team will typically discuss is the present levels of academic and functional performance. So this is looking at their evaluation, any assessments like state assessments or classroom assessments, their strengths and needs. So this is not just, like I said, strengths and needs in the core areas like math and reading and science, social studies. This is also strengths and needs related to their hearing loss. So how are they socializing in their classroom? Are they able to repair conversations if they missed some information? What does their language look like? Academic, vocabulary, things like that. And then they're going to look at the impact of disability on the involvement and progress in general education. So what does the student need to be able to access the general education setting and peers to be involved in that general education setting? If they're not in the general education setting all day long, what do they need to be able to work toward being in the general education setting? And then the parent concerns. And again, this is a huge area that sometimes parents don't feel like they can really bring all the information that they have, but you as a parent know your child the best. So it's really important to encourage family members to come to the table with information concerns, if they want to see their child be doing something better, if there's an area of weakness that they would like addressed in the IEP, this is the opportunity to bring that to the table, and the IEP team can address that. And then there's a special factors section, which we will look at in a minute, but this is really the part of the IEP that is special to kids who are eligible under deaf, hard of hearing. And that there are certain considerations, like I said, that we'll look at, but it is addressed every time that you have an IEP meeting and the child has an eligibility of deaf, hard of hearing. There's also visual impairments, if needed, behavior concerns if needed. So if the child has a behavior that is impacting their education or interfering with their education, it may be addressed. A behavior or a bit is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we may write a bit because the child doesn't want to wear the hearing aids, and we as a team need to know how to address that. And what happens if they don't want to wear their hearing aids? What's the extra plan? What's plan B? What do we do as a team? So if your team wants to have a bit or a behavior intervention plan, just know it's not a bad thing. It's something to help your child work on those behaviors, or the team to be prepared when those behaviors occur. And then special factors of communication. So we want to look at, are there any communication concerns and what are we doing about those? And then assistive technology. So this could be closed captions or an FM system, anything that your child uses as technology to access the curriculum would be under assistive technology. And then if the child is an English language learner, that's also addressed in this section. Finally, the team will go over annual goals. So these goals are updated every year, and they are based directly on the present level. So the strengths and weaknesses that were addressed in present levels should also be addressed in the annual goals. They should be updated yearly, and they should be appropriate for the student to make that amount of progress during that year. Again, this is a really important part for the families to be participants on. If you don't agree with that goal, or you feel like you want something a little more ambitious for your child, it's appropriate for you to say that, to ask for something more, ask for a different goal, discuss that with your team. These are team decisions that you can do with your team. So the student support section is where we talk about any accommodations and modifications that are needed. So we're going to look at testing accommodations such as milestones. Maybe the student needs video sign language, or they need directions read aloud, or extended time. There are all sorts of accommodations, but we also look at instructional accommodations. So these are accommodations that happen in the classroom to support instruction. So does the student need to be seated closer to the teacher? Does the student need to make sure, does the teacher need to get the student's attention before they start speaking? Any instructional accommodations that help the student access the curriculum. Supplementary aids and services. So this is going to be, it could be an interpreter, it could be closed captions. Really, what does the student need, again, to access their curriculum, access the school? Supports for school personnel. So this is training for the teacher on if they need to work with an interpreter, or how do you turn on closed captions, beginning of the year training throughout the year, or supports so they know how to support the student. And then services is the next part. So we're going to look at what services does the student need to make progress. And we always start with the least restrictive. So we want the student to start out in a general education setting with the least amount of services. And then as needed, we will go to a more restrictive service model. So we may do general education with supportive instruction, such as the paraprofessional, or general education with a co-teacher. So 2 teachers, regular ed and a special ed teacher, working together to support the whole class. Or all the way to, we may need to pull the student out of the class, general education classroom, to give them more significant direct instruction. And the team explains, or needs to explain, why they are pulling the student out of general education to provide those services. What is the need that warrants those services? And then, of course, we talk about participation in state and district assessments. And then if the student is 16 years old or 9th grade and older, every IEP meeting, they will discuss a transition plan. And so the goal of this is to make sure that student is ready for life after high school. So what is the career goals of that student? What education or training do they need? Are they going to go to college? Are they going to go to a technical school? Are they going to get voc rehab support? What's their goal? And you're going to talk about that every year and create goals to work toward that, to move toward that. Also, what's their living goal? Are they going to live with their family? Are they going to get their own place? What do you need to do to get ready for that? And then extended school year. So extended school year is for a child who maybe is right on the cusp of learning something new or meeting a goal or objective, or they have like serious slide, summer slide is what we call it. So serious slide over the summer, they lose a lot of their skills, and then they come back in August and you're basically starting over. So we may offer or be able to offer extended school year for that student to keep or maintain those skills or finish learning that skill that they were about to learn. It's not appropriate for every student, and it's something that the team would need to discuss, and there needs to be data to show that it's warranted. It's not the same thing as summer school. It's a different service than summer school for the general ed students. It's extended school year for the IEP goals. So like I said, the special factors part of the IEP, this is just for students who have an eligibility of deaf or hard of hearing. And these are the things that have to be considered every single IEP. The team has to consider the language and communication needs of that child. So this is like I said, language and communication. So how is that child communicating in the classroom? How are they communicating socially with their peers, expressively, receptively? Are they expressively using spoken language, but receptively they need sign supported English, ASL, or spoken language and ASL? That needs to be discussed at every IEP meeting. We're also talking about opportunities for direct communication with peers and adults in that child's language and communication map. So again, not just what we want them to be using ASL all the time, but what are they actually doing in the classroom? What does that look like? What are they doing in the hallways when their interpreter isn't standing by them or when adults aren't watching them? How are they communicating? We're looking at academic level, so vocabulary needed for that level of academics. So do they have that vocabulary? Are they struggling in their class setting? Are they performing well? And then we want to look at the full range of needs, including opportunities for direct instruction in the child's language and communication mode. And we can also look at how are we supporting the family? So if the student is going to be an ASL user, are we supporting the family in learning ASL? If the student is going to be listening spoken language, are we supporting the family in understanding how to support that at home, how to work on vocabulary, increasing vocabulary? So the family, again, is an important part of this IEP. And these are just some quick examples of accommodations. This is not exhaustive by any means. Again, accommodations are what are required or what are needed for the student to access their instruction, access their environment. What do they need to make progress in the classroom? So of course, extended time, that may be time to process, it may be time to look from the interpreter or the closed captions to the assignment to the teacher, preferential seating, shortened assignments. I'm not going to read them all, but you get the picture here. You or the family member, the team, you can do your research on what are appropriate accommodations. Bring them to the table. If you find that something works really well for your student, bring that to the table. Ask if that's something that could be offered for the child, if that's something that's available. You don't have to just wait on the teacher to bring you accommodations or a list of accommodations. Come to the table prepared. So let's say we've written an IEP and we wrote the IEP in August and now it's January and my child is struggling with some particular thing in the classroom. What if something needs to change? The parent or team member can request an IEP meeting whenever you need to discuss concerns about the IEP. This doesn't mean that you have to rewrite an entirely new IEP. It just means that you're coming together as a team to discuss concerns. IEPs are fluid documents. They can change for any reason, really. If you see that the child's not making progress on a goal, you can bring the team together and say, hey, they're not making progress on this goal. Either the goal is inappropriate or we're not providing the supports necessary to make progress. However, even though they're fluid, they cannot be changed without agreement by all required team members. So the IEPs cannot be changed without a parent agreement, but also without other team members, the general education teacher, the special education teacher. They all have to be in agreement. And then if you do have this meeting and think that something needs to be changed or discussed, an amendment meeting is held to discuss those updates, parent concerns, progress monitoring, whatever it looks like. It's not the annual review. So annually we do review IEPs and we do change them. But if in the meantime you want to have a meeting, that's just an amendment meeting. And it is not a big deal, I promise. It's not a problem to ask for an amendment meeting or just an IEP meeting in general. So you may be thinking, my child is doing really well, performing really well. Their language is excellent. Do they really need special education? So the answer to that is your child doesn't really have to be failing or struggling to benefit from special education services for the deaf, hard of hearing. So the team must decide that your child will benefit from specially designed instruction for learners who are deaf or hard of hearing. So maybe thinking, what is specially designed instruction? So expanded core curriculum is something that if your student has a DHH eligibility, they'll be working on outside of the core curriculum. So outside of math or reading, science or studies, they're going to look at the expanded core curriculum. And these are those specialized skills that students need really to be ready for life outside of school, outside of high school. And there's a expanded core curriculum for vision, and there's expanded core curriculum for deaf, hard of hearing. So these are the areas of the ECC for students who are deaf, hard of hearing. So audiology, we want to make sure the student understands their hearing loss, how to manage their equipment, how to explain their hearing loss, how to schedule an audiological appointment when they're 18 and they have to call the audiologist to make an appointment. What do they ask for? Career education, just knowing that there are jobs out there available for them, all the way to when you disclose your disability. When do you disclose that you need closed captioning in the workplace? Communication, so this is vocabulary, language, communication, repair in a social setting. Family education, we want to make sure, again, that families understand what their child needs and support them in providing that, but also that they understand what they need after high school and how to work on that transition piece. Functional skills for education success. So we want to make sure that students have that concept development, that they understand how to organize their life. And a lot of this is family involvement, making sure that families are working on that at home. But also, do they know how to take their FM system or DM system from classroom to classroom and can keep up with that? Self-determination, advocacy, that's pretty self-explanatory, but do they know how to advocate for themselves, not just in the school, but at Walmart or at Starbucks or at the hospital? Do they know how to ask for what they need and how to explain why they need it? Social emotional skills, this is so important. And then technology. So do they know not only how to access what they have available at school, but how to get things after school, how to ask for something in college, how to get closed captions or CART in the college setting? Do they know all of that? So you can see that it starts from the time a child enters school and the skills progress all the way through the time they graduate. So even though your child has A's in all their classrooms, they may need these supports because this is information that families don't always understand or know to teach their child. But there are specialized teachers of the deaf, hard of hearing, that can teach these skills outside of the core curriculum. All right, so that was my part, and now I'm going to toss it over to Ann Ladd, and she's going to talk about what families can do to create that engagement.
Good afternoon. Share the PowerPoint.
Super. Yeah, we're going to be sharing our PowerPoint after the presentation. And this PowerPoint includes a number of, there we go. I'm lower than Emily. Links. And I'm not sure if I can switch to the links while I'm presenting in Zoom, but if not, they're there for you and I can talk through them. That's fine. So good afternoon. As you heard earlier, I am a family engagement specialist, and I took sort of circuitous route, a windy route, I'll say that for the captioners, to this job. But I am a parent of a young adult son now who did participate participate in Babies Can't Wait and did participate in Georgia Pines many years ago and successfully navigated through school in Gwinnett County Schools and graduated. So I have a lot of experience and have been working in the world of family engagement since about 2005 and have met many, many families and have learned so much. But so it's wonderful to be in have the opportunity to be able to share knowledge and that life experience. It's, you know, it's really just builds other people's capacity as well as my own, and it's a healing process as well. So today I'm going to talk about, I'm going to explain the importance of family engagement, and I would like to share some resources to support parents' active role within that IEP, the Individualized Education Program, meetings, and what you can do maybe before and during and after. And hopefully some of this will sync with what you just heard from Emily as well. And I'd like to share some techniques and strategies to possibly prevent special education disputes, because those happen, and provide tips for transition planning. So, definition of a parent, and like I said, I do family engagement, but an IDEA, parent actually has a broad definition, and we've adopted that federal definition, which explains that parent is a person acting as parent, a surrogate parent, or guardian. So I'd like to ask you guys, hopefully I can see the chat, or this is actually a poll. Hopefully I can launch the poll. But how many of you believe that family engagement is important? Am I launching this poll myself?
Maybe
Okay.
it's in the chat, very important.
Let's look. Okay, awesome. Yep, in the chat is perfectly fine. Okay. So do we see anything? Okay, very important. Yes, it's absolutely important. Yeah, 100%. Wow. Good. This is job security for me. Thank you very much. I have yet to ever have anyone say, no, absolutely not. Let's keep these families out. We know what we're doing, or whatever. So everyone typically agrees that family engagement is important. But does everyone always know exactly what family engagement is? Because it sounds important. All right, so now I'm going to try to move forward. That's fine. Okay, so what is family engagement? So we use parent and family, as I said, sort of interchangeably, but we prefer family as that broader term because there's lots of people that are involved in a child's life. It could be aunts and uncles and siblings and parents or grandparents. There's so many grandparents involved with children now. So we do like to talk about that broader definition of family. And then we also interchange involvement and engagement. So involvement's more of those tangible things that you might be doing, which is very important. It's definitely part of engagement, but engagement is sort of that deeper action and ongoing. And so we often use this engagement ring, because if my son comes home or daughter comes home and says, hey, I'm involved with someone new, you're like, oh, I'm interested. But if they come home and say they're engaged with someone new or to someone new, then you're really interested. So engagement is just that ongoing communication, collaboration, and shared decision making between families and those other interested parties. So yes, we love involvement. We love parents and families to be active and come and cut things out or work at the bake sale. All those things are fabulous. That's good modeling to your children that value the institution of education and what's happening in the school. But engagement are those ongoing things. And actually, a family member doesn't even have to go into a school building to be engaged. It starts from preparing the child to attend school, to supporting all of those things. So we just like to think of it as that. Think about that engagement ring and how much deeper you go. So why is it important? Well, of course, I say it's important, and you all have said it's important. I'm a family engagement specialist, so of course I think it's important, but you guys said it was important as well. But there is actually lots of good research to back this up, in our opinion. And we know that there was actually a large synthesis done of research back in 2002 was really when it got going. But Ann Henderson, Karen Mapp are a couple of those family engagement gurus who've done a lot of the research. And they told us that when families are engaged, that students achieve more, and that's regardless of socioeconomic status, the ethnic or racial background, or a parent's education level. And I love that. I love the idea that every parent, every family member has an opportunity to play a significant role in influencing the outcomes for that child. So doesn't matter that family or parents' education level, they can play that important role. And so that's what we try to do in family engagement, is to empower the family members to support their child and to see those better outcomes and to believe that it's possible. So what does engagement look like? How can we be engaged? The most important thing, and again, I've been doing this a long time, and as I'll be telling you later, we have a help desk at the Georgia Department of Education. And so the number one problem when I talk to families or to educators is typically something regarding communication. Communication. So if we can get that right, that goes a long way. So building that two-way communication, and that could look different from parent to parent to teacher to teacher. However that's happening, it has to be reestablished all the time. It's an ongoing process. But for the parent to, at the beginning of the school year or the beginning of that relationship with the professional, to determine what's going to work. Letting the professional know, hey, this is how I communicate best. This is when I'm available. This is how I can take information. And then allowing that professional to also say, hey, this is, my work day. Here's the time that I can respond. Here's the best way for me to share information. And really coming to that consensus. So that's an intentional conversation that often has to happen. But if we can establish that good communication, that goes a long way. Because we don't always have to be in agreement, but if we can communicate, then maybe we can come to agreement or come to consensus around problems. But for both families and professionals, we equally have to regard each other's circumstances and what we're each bringing to the table. And for families to really get to know your child's team. I know as a parent, they may have rolled their eyes a few times. I can't say for sure. I didn't do it in front of me, but it may have happened. But I always made sure that I knew everyone, met everyone that was interacting with my son in the various areas. And again, respectfully, not over communicating, but establishing those good processes for communication. I just felt like that information sharing made it easier when we finally got to that IEP table, that we had ongoing conversation and ongoing relationships. So get to know that team. And then support learning at home. Families don't know what they don't know. And families aren't necessarily educators or don't have that background, but we do model to our children. We do have that opportunity to educate our children. So don't hesitate to ask for those tasks that you can do to carry forth whatever is happening at school, to reinforce that at home. And if you're the educator in the room here today, same thing. Work with families. What are some of those tasks that they can do with their child to just reinforce what you're already doing? We can't say, well, this is school and this is home. What can cross over? What can we do together? That's really important. And again, that ongoing communication, is so helpful for that. For families, keeping records is great. I mean, it's important for you to do, and to have samples of schoolwork, keeping record of conversations, maybe just even record of things that are going on at home, your child's disposition, anything new or different. So keeping those records, keeping those formal school records, and also your notes is really important, and part of that engagement, because again, it can inform that communication. Keeping a list of your parental concerns. So as you have concerns and you're maybe in these conversations and it's not getting resolved, or you're seeing a bigger picture that you want to have a conversation about, make sure that you keep those things documented so that you're prepared when you do have that opportunity to share those parental concerns. And absolutely participate in IEP team meetings. Team meetings should be scheduled at a time that is convenient for families and schools, again, using that consensus to determine when we're going to work together and come to a meeting. You can participate virtually if that's better for you, or in person, but always participate in an IEP team meeting, and suggest a different time if that time doesn't work for you. But families are critical and very important in that process. So at that meeting, you want to be a partner in developing and implementing that IEP as well. And that will be bringing good ideas to the table, and then making sure that everyone is on the same page, and going forward doing the things that we've outlined in that IEP. So partnering and developing and implementing the IEP. Family participation is an essential feature of the development and implementation of a high quality educational programming for students with disabilities. Again, we've said this, Emily said this, you as a family member are an expert on that child, and your expertise is needed at the table. And so be sure to come prepared with all of those good ideas. So I'm just going to ask again real quickly, if you don't mind using your chat again. In your mind, what is an effective team? So before you answer, just think about the characteristics, and then type your response in the chat, but don't hit enter yet. And I'm going to count to 3, and I'm going to let you all hit your chat at the same time. So the question is, think about characteristics of an effective team. So if you'll put that into the chat, I'll give you just a second to type in, and I think I can hit chat. So let's see. Okay. And so I'm going to count now to 3. And if everyone will just hit enter, we'll see what we've come up with of what is an effective team. 1, 2, 3. Oh, wow, you guys are fast. Dedication, collaboration, good listening, honest, educated.
We'll have common goals.
Common goals. What else?
Communication.
Curiosity, teamwork. Those are all great. I love
Variety of skills from different people.
variety of skills from different people. That's a good one. Respect, different points of views. That's all excellent. You guys are a smart group. And I bet you're all very effective team members.
Having the same goal in mind.
Having the same goal in mind. I love that. And that goal should be that child and those outcomes for that student that we're talking about.
Understanding first before judgment.
Understanding first before being judgmental. Love that. Those are all good.
Entering curiosity, listen, all players present. So listen.
Listening. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. You guys you have some good ideas to bring forth to the table. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so when we think about that IEP team, who is on the team? So the members who are required to be on the team is the parent, a general education teacher, a special education teacher, an individual who can interpret the instructional im- im- implications of evaluation results, and a representative of the public agency, the LEA. That's the decision maker. They have the power to make decisions about how a district can utilize funding and make things happen. So they need to be at the table. The student is not required, but a very important person to consider having the IEP team meeting. And any individual with special expertise or knowledge or special interest in that child is an important person as well. But the ones with the asterisks are the required members. And so why are families an important member of the team? Well, as we've said, families are experts regarding their child. And so while we may not be experts on education, we know our children. But we have to come forward, open-minded, because we are all different in different circumstances. So schools have some expertise on our children as well. And certainly educators have the expertise on education. But first and foremost, family members are that expert. And they can provide we can provide great information related to the child's unique characteristics, strengths, weaknesses, that behavior at home, academic and social history, data from additional assessments that may have been done elsewhere, and any kind of outside influences as well. So families have a lot of important things to share. So what do we do before that IEP team meeting? I liked that idea of no surprises. So I mentioned before, I tried to create a relationship with the team members who I knew would be part of that meeting. And so I like to gather as much information as possible as a parent so I wouldn't go in with surprises. Sometimes that's not possible, but if it is, if you have a good relationship, they'll often share good information with you. So you're not surprised when you get to the table. But the first thing will be to determine that time and date of a meeting that works for your schedule as a family, and inform the school of any communication needs that you'll need in that meeting, if it's an interpreter or a translator or any other thing you need to access the meeting. And then consider who else you may want to invite to participate in that IEP team meeting. So it's a good idea to go ahead and let the school know if you're going to bring a friend with you. I think it's a good idea to have some type of partner at a meeting with you. They can understand what you are interested in communicating. They might be able to put their hand on their leg if things get hot, or help you remember things that you're afraid you might forget. If you choose to bring an advocate, that sometimes can change the dynamics, and sometimes that might be necessary or appropriate, but I would suggest always to have some type of friend or ally, another set of eyes with you. And provide parents and student input. So have a conversation with your child, depending on their age and abilities, before the meeting. Like, what are some of the things that you've experienced this year? How are things going? What's working well for you? What do you think you need? And have some of those conversations before you get there. Review those records. You've been keeping school records, you've been keeping your own notes. So kind of think through all those things and take a look at all that. And then, as I mentioned, request any information you might want to be able to review in advance. Sometimes that's something the school can provide for you. And any kind of requests you have, I always suggest making requests in writing. That way we all know it's been done, and there's no question. So during that IEP team meeting, and I don't know about you, but so often when we go, we may be sitting, like I am in a room right now with people sitting in front of me. And I feel like, oh, I'm the only one on this side of the table. Let me tell you that we do suggest to schools not to set rooms up in that way so that families feel like it's them against us, school personnel or school staff, but sometimes it's that way. And so it's important, like I said, to bring that friend or family member for support and just to, again, so that you can pay attention. You're not constantly trying to remember that you want to ask about, you know, OT services when it gets there and you can't pay attention to present levels because you're focused on something later in the meeting. And also, to that point, have a list of your concerns or things you want to discuss. It's helpful that you have that there to make you feel more comfortable and relaxed in the meeting. Ask for clarification of acronyms or anything else you don't understand. You know, in education, we use acronyms all day long. So I think sometimes as the parent, you feel like I should know what they're talking about. I've been coming to these meetings for all these years. Don't worry about it. If someone says LRE and you don't know what that means, just say, excuse me, can you define what you're talking about? And that's not a problem. People just forget. They're so used to using acronyms, but be sure to stop and ask for clarification of anything that you don't understand. Bring your child when appropriate to a meeting. And if they can't come, then bring a picture of your child. Have some representation of that person that we're all here for, because this is not about our adult relationships. This is about a student or in this child or youth who is moving towards graduation. So hopefully, though, your child will participate. And I suggest to parents of even very young children to have them just come in and maybe introduce their family member or introduce their teacher to their parent, just so that we can start getting them to learn that importance of participating, speaking on their own behalf, and reminding everyone of what we're here for. So if they do come, give them some type of role in that meeting. So after you make it through that IEP team meeting, and hopefully it doesn't last for too many hours. Fortunately, in my experience, we were able to get through ours pretty quickly because as I said, we tried to do a lot of work on the front end. Doesn't always happen that way. But after that meeting, take time to process what you've heard. If you feel like things didn't go exactly as you hoped, don't panic, but step away, process, and understand, as Emily mentioned, that the meeting we can reconvene. We can come back to the table. It's not as though you can only have one meeting a year, and that's that. So take some time to process what's been said and determined and decided, the goals that have been written. And identify before the end of that meeting, really identify who you can follow up with after the meeting and who those questions should go to. And perhaps it's the teacher or perhaps it's someone else who will answer your question. When you leave, just review, make sure that everything is accurate as you understood and complete. And if you need to, ask for a follow-up appointment to address those questions that you may have, if that's necessary. Also, ask in the meeting, are there additional resources available to parents at our school or in our district? Or what do you know about that might be happening in the community? Because we don't always know as families what else there might be. What can I do to resolve a concern regarding my child's education? So in the best of worlds, we come together, we write this great, robust plan, and we all go forward, and it's just wonderful, and the children do well and meet their goals. But sometimes we do get to a place where we have a concern and we just can't get past that. So the first thing to do, though, is to contact that person that you have the concern, with whom you have the concern, that's closest to your child as possible. Solving problems close to our child, again, so that it remains around the child and not around these adult relationships. That's the most important thing. And so if it's with the child's teacher or at that teacher level in the classroom level, start there. That doesn't work. Who's the next person in line? Who's that supervisor? Who's that principal at that school? And if you can't get something resolved at the school level, always make sure that you reach out to a special education director in the school district. They are there to represent special education. They want things to be going well for you. And sometimes they're not aware of something that may be happening at the school level. So they would be the next person to go to. And if you can't resolve it there, you have a superintendent of your school district as well. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, but sometimes it does. Let me just share a few other supports that are available for you as well. And if you've tried all these things, other things, or in addition to trying those things, we have a continuum of support at our State Department of Education. And so we kind of think of this continuum as starting with family engagement, because we believe that if families are engaged and valued and teachers and families and schools are all working well together, then you're going to go a long way. So we like to start there. So perhaps in your school district, you have a parent mentor. Parent mentors are parents of children who either have an IEP or have had an IEP in the past, so they have that lived experience, and they're employed by the school district, but they're parents, and they're there with that lens, and they're there to provide the supports, to make those community connections, to explain those things. Also, what's really cool about it is the parent mentor is inside the school building or inside the school district, so they can share that parent perspective as well. And I know in my experience, I could have been at the copy machine and someone could be saying something about, a parent concern. And I said, well, have you ever thought about this or that, or what they're experiencing? Because you know what? Parents of students with disabilities have lives like everyone else and have all the same issues and concerns going on in life with just a little extra concerns regarding their students. So it's really a helpful person who has a foot on kind of both inside and outside the school district. So I provided a link here for a Find a Mentor page. I'm a little concerned to click out of this PowerPoint, but there is a link, and it's parentmentors.org, and it's Find a Mentor. So you can go on and look at your district to see if you have a parent mentor. I also wanted to share that in Georgia, we have a state advisory panel. This is another way that families can be involved, families and professionals. The state advisory panel is a panel who advises our state special education director. They have just completed their application process for the coming school year, but it typically is open in March, I believe. And this panel meets around quarterly to get updates and provide feedback to the special education director and the department around special education issues. They also have a process for public comment. So I would like to encourage you, whether you're a professional or family member, either one, if you go to this link on the state advisory panel page, there's an electronic link for providing public comment, or you can write in a letter. But it's an underutilized opportunity, but it's a great opportunity. If you see a trend in the community or you have an experience that you want to bring forward to a group of people, it's a great way for you to be engaged. And then hopefully you are aware of, or perhaps you're not, with Parent to Parent Georgia. They are our parent training and information center in Georgia. They have a great database of resources and can also work with families one-to-one. So if you don't have a parent mentor, that's another good resource as well. And we collaborate with them at the department as well. If you can't resolve the issues that you're having, or there's something more egregious happening, there's a whole dispute prevention. There's dispute resolution. But before that, let me discuss the dispute prevention. briefly. So I put a link here for procedural safeguards. Those are your parent rights. You've probably seen them many times. Every time you go to a meeting, they hand you this long piece of paper. And we just often, maybe we do, or maybe we don't look at them. But on our DOE website, we do have some videos, so it explains them a little bit, and it gives you a couple of samples of the procedural safeguards. We also, at the Department of Education, have a special education help desk. You can reach out to the help desk either by telephone, there's someone who monitors the phone line, or send an email to spedhelpdesk@doe.k12.ga.us. Again, if you hit the link, it should take you there. But you could send an email if you have questions. Again, this is for professionals, for stakeholders, family members. If you just need some clarification about the law, or you have general questions, it's a great resource. And we established this probably it's about 6 or 7 years ago. Again, just to help give people information, because communication and information are some of the biggest barriers that we find. Another great program that we started about 8 years ago is IEP team meeting facilitation. I don't know if you're familiar with IEP facilitators, but we have a group of people who have been trained as facilitators, and they're contracted with the State Department of Education, and a family or a school can suggest to have a facilitated IEP team meeting. This would have to be, both parties have to agree that they want a meeting. But what happens is a third party comes to the meeting. They're not part of the team, but they're just facilitating it, just making sure it goes well. They will often make sure we're seated well in a room, that everyone's voice is heard, and sort of changes the tone. So if you feel like you're going to have a contentious meeting, or relationships have been hard in the past, this is a great tool to utilize. And there's no cost to the family, and there's no cost to the school district. And we get really good. We do survey data on the meetings, and it's very high the level of appreciation of the process. So again, this might be something to utilize. And additionally, we have an IDEA ombudsman. And so the ombudsman's role is to, again, they solve problems. And so if you reach out to the help desk and it's just something bigger that the help desk can answer, or again, it's something that's just been an ongoing issue, that person can speak to you. They can reach out to a school district. So it's just another level of problem solving that we try to put in place to prevent maybe possibly the need for going forward to those dispute resolution processes. But those, of course, are also part of that continuum. Those are part of your IDEA parental rights. And so filing a complaint, asking for mediation, or requesting a due process hearing are all part of those parental rights. And if you need any information about that, you can reach out to the Special Education Help Desk for more information about that. So here are a few tips for families, and some things that sometimes we may or may not think about as we're kind of moving through the day. But really, you have to be intentional about focusing on your child's strengths. So often when we're talking about special education, because the idea of special education is to provide those supports and to look at those deficits. That's why we're receiving specialized instruction. But on the other hand, we have to remember that our child has tremendous strengths as well in other areas. So we can get bogged down in some of those processes and neglect to really focus and think about those strengths. So that's a good tip for you to think about. Maybe write it down, put it on your mirror in the morning. Give your child the chance to be all that they can be. Sometimes we have to step away as parents, let them, safely fail periodically. And through that, we grow and we learn. So actually, my husband and I were having that conversation yesterday, and my mother used to put me in really interesting situations that were challenging, but then after I got through them, I felt more strong and able to go forward. So that's just something we have to think about. Not unsafe, but protected, but step away a little bit. And then take one day at a time and realize the progress you made. So often we don't step back and realize, oh, we've come a long way. And pat ourselves on the back, pat your kid on the back, pat the whole team on the back, and just realize that you've come far. And here's something I want to suggest to you, that it's never too early to prepare for transition. So I don't know if you work with young children, or your child is very young, or maybe perhaps they're moving towards that late transition age. But whatever level they are at, encouraging and talking about transition is so important. We have some graduation fact sheets that are also included in a link on the resources on the next page. And we start with preschool. And how do we talk about graduation with preschool children, around preschool children? And so those may not be the words that we use, but we always want to remember that that's what we're working towards. We're working towards positive outcomes to that transition from school. Even when we're transitioning into school, we're thinking about what is it going to look like when we transition out of school. So we have some great fact sheets, one for preschool, one for elementary, one for middle, and one for high school as well. And then I've included in here charting the life course tools. This is just a great, robust group of tools to look at and you can utilize for problem solving. So when you have some time, dive in. It takes some time to look through them all, but I've used them with my own son when we've kind of needed to solve a problem, or have a problem that we need to pull out and kind of be creative and think outside the box. And then explore your community. What is there out in the community that may be just a great way to be included, that may not be something particular for my child's particular need, but just broadly opportunities to participate in things that we're interested in. So on this resource sheet, I have the parent information fact sheet. If you go to that site, it will have that page on the web page. It has all the parent rights. It has multiple languages. It also has particular areas of that you may have questions about. It's a good page of good information. And then the implementation manual is a good resource as well. It really interprets what the rules and the laws should look like in practice. So it's a good, easy, parent-friendly document to use if you have some questions or you're confused about some aspect of the IEP or special education. And then the Parent Mentor website, there's some family resources there. And then also I've included the Parent to Parent website. They have archived webinars. So those are always good to explore and see what else you can learn. Or if you're the professional, some things that you may share with families. This is a fun tool that I've just included for you to go look at it. It's free. It's called Working Together series. It's from Cadre, which is a technical assistance center regarding dispute resolution. But they're little modules and they go through like an IEP meeting and how you might react or respond in meetings. Gives you some tips and tools to learn how to participate. And you can participate either as the family member or as the educator. So those are just a good tool to know about. And this is happens to be my son, Matthew. He is enrolling along there, and he loves to participate in 5Ks. And so we try to do so when we can. And we have an organization that will participate with, will provide adaptive bicycles and things. But this is an opportunity to get to know other people in the community running with this father and son. We did not know them before this, but it was just a lot of fun. But an enviable life, we talk a lot about Maddie's enviable life, is a life that we all want, and the supports needed to live life to the fullest. So, we're all here for however long we're here, and we just want to have a good time and be safe and be engaged and feel love. And that's really the goal of all of it, to really find our strengths and live life and have a meaningful day, have friends and family, and belong to our communities, which means there's an expectation that we're there, that we're showing up, and that people are expecting to see us, and to have recreation and fun. So I know that we have a lot of academic needs, but overall it's about this getting to those good post-school outcomes and eventually having that enviable life. So thank you. And I think now we're going to have some questions.
Yeah, we're gonna do Q&A. We have some good questions, but you guys can see them, right? Because I don't know if they can hear my voice.
Yeah.
I have a pretty good, but you can, they can't see it, so you can read the question out loud.
Okay.
You can't see it.
Yeah, I can see. I was just trying to make sure we're catching on. Some of them are answered, so I'm assuming those are not questions. Okay, they're not. All right. So right now we have a few questions. So if you think of any while we're answering these, feel free to put them in the Q&A section, or I guess the chat. I guess they're in both.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with what's in the Q&A. So the first question is, it's been my experience with some school systems that some do a vision screening and some don't. Some just require you to bring in a passing vision test. This has caused problems for many of my families as they are not sure where to go to get the screening. Pediatrician, pediatric eye doctor, what do you recommend? So this is kind of a district specific thing. However, I know sometimes districts struggle with vision screenings because it's hard if the child is like 3 years old to get them to participate in a typical vision screening where they have to tell you what they see on the screen, if they see the letters or whatever. We are working on making sure that districts have devices in their district that can bypass that, that do not need very close. That don't need the participation of the student. So there are machines out there that can screen a student's vision without requiring the student to tell you what they can see. So we're working on getting that. My short and sweet answer to this is, if they've had a vision screening at the eye doctor or pediatrician, bring it with you. It doesn't hurt to have that. If they've passed a screening, they've passed a screening. If you don't have that, or the parents don't have that documentation, then just let the district know, we don't have that documentation, we need you to screen them at the school. If the child fails the screening, then they're still going to have to go to the eye doctor, and they're going to have to get either passing information from the eye doctor or glasses or some sort of diagnosis. So it's not unlikely that they don't need to go to an eye doctor. A lot of times these kiddos do just need to go to the eye doctor. But if a district tells you that they can't evaluate because of that, ask them to please screen my child. I don't have there's not a doctor that I can take them to right now. Screen them. If they fail, we'll take them to an eye doctor and move forward with the evaluation. So the next question is, are evaluation reports given for each area of the evaluation? Again, this is kind of a district specific thing. Not every time a child is evaluated are they going to be evaluated in like all 12 areas of disability or eligibility categories, or sometimes they may not get a full psych evaluation. But the report piece of it is district specific. So some districts will put all the information on one report, and they'll just have DHH information, psychologist information, speech and language information, Some districts will have separate reports. Some different districts will have the eligibility report that comes up in the IEP program, and that will be the report that they provide to the parents. So there's not really a perfect answer for this, and I'm sorry, it's just district specific. But I think it's appropriate if you feel like you would like more in-depth information about a piece of the evaluation to ask for that, to say, hey, I see this testing that you did. Can you explain it to me a little bit more in depth? That's totally appropriate. All right, and then the next question, do school systems require aided as well as unaided information in the audiological report? The answer to that is no. If the child is not aided, then they can't require that the child be aided as a part of the audiological report. It is currently written in the Georgia board rules. There's a paragraph about what the audiological report is supposed to contain or should have information about. That does kind of trip districts up sometimes because they want to see it written out each of those areas, even if it's not appropriate to a student. So it's okay to say, I don't have this aided part because my child is not aided, or I don't have an FM system test because they're not using an FM system. Whatever the piece is that's not appropriate, we're working on making that more appropriate and a little easier to understand for districts. But right now, they shouldn't deny an evaluation because they're missing a piece of it if it's understandable why that piece is missing. It may be helpful just to have the audiologist write a note that says, we didn't test for this because of whatever. All right, this next question, do you see that there are or are not major differences from state to state when it comes to eligibility? I don't see major differences because we're all going off of IDEA's rules as far as eligibility criteria for deaf, hard of hearing. Some states have added some caveats to that definition or to the eligibility process. So Georgia has created that list of what we would want to see as a part of that evaluation. Other states have similar information, but it's all ultimately from IDEA, which is the national law. So we're all going off of that law. So no, shouldn't be huge differences. If the next question, if a child is not found eligible for deaf, hard of hearing services, how does the child receive services for the ECC or expanded core curriculum? So typically, if a child is not found eligible for deaf, hard of hearing services, it is because they don't need those specially designed instruction. So they wouldn't need the areas or services for ECC. So they could still get accommodations like FM system or extended time, things like that, but they're not going to get that specially designed instruction for deaf, hard of hearing. If they need the ECC or they would benefit from the ECC areas of instruction, then they would need that eligibility for deaf, hard of hearing. So hope that answers that one. Oh, this one's reading.
So I think that
Hold on, the question.
oh,
I can see it.
oh, I'm so sorry. Is the Working Together series available in different languages? Great question. I love that question. And I am looking at it now, and it looks like it is available in Spanish, but that's the only language that I see that additional to English. So, but thank you for asking that.
All right. Does Georgia have anything in place for students with auditory processing disorders? Will they qualify in Georgia under deaf, hard of hearing due to the same auditory concerns, but without hearing loss to receive supports? This is a hard question. Again, I think ultimately we are looking at educational impact. So what eligibility category they fall under is not as important as does it impact education. So I can't really say, it kind of depends on how they're evaluated and who's evaluating them. So I'm not going to say yes or no, they would fall under DHH because again, it's kind of who's making that choice. Ultimately, if their auditory processing disorder is impacting their education, they will be eligible for special education under either specific learning disability, potentially if it's impacting their speech and language, potentially deaf, hard of hearing. It's kind of one of those things that we really just want to make sure that we're providing the appropriate service. Again, we're looking at specially designed instruction. So if that auditory processing disorder then requires those areas of ECC for DHH, deaf, hard of hearing, then potentially they would be eligible under deaf, hard of hearing. If they don't really need those DHH specific ECC areas, then they might need to be eligible under another eligibility category. So that one is it's not a new area. It's just something that we, I think, are all trying to figure out, where does it go? Similar to vision, cortical visual impairment, it's how the brain processes information. All right, the next question, how often does an evaluation need to be done during the student's school life? So again, this is a district by district scenario. So if a student, the first thing is if a student is found eligible under significant developmental disability, SDD, when they're 3, let's say, they have to have a new eligibility category by the time they turn 9. So the school year that they turn 9, they have to get a new category. So it could just be then that they've got, maybe they start out with deaf, hard of hearing and SDD. They've got to get something in place of, or they're not going to keep that SDD eligibility category. Maybe they'll just have deaf, hard of hearing. Now, if they get an eligibility category of deaf, hard of hearing when they turn 3, there is not a requirement that they have to have a full evaluation, like a full psychological comprehensive evaluation. However, every 3 years, the evaluation team, IEP team, has to meet and look at all the data that they have, look at the audiological report, look at the processing, look at how's the student doing in the school, in the classroom, and they have to decide, do we have enough data to say that the student is still eligible under whatever category they're eligible under? So let's say deaf, hard of hearing. Do we still have the information to say that that's appropriate? If yes, then we keep that category for potentially another 3 years, and then we would meet again in 3 years, make the same decision. They have the option to say, yes, we have enough information to say that they still meet this eligibility, but we would like to update it. We would like to do a new listening observation and social emotional skills assessment or something like that for more information to help guide the IEP. That's an option. They can choose that. It doesn't open up the eligibility for a new eligibility purpose, but it does open it up for an evaluation purpose. Or they can say, we don't really have enough information, or we need more information to determine if this eligibility is still appropriate. We need to reevaluate. And at that point, they would reevaluate, do a comprehensive evaluation. So that decision is made every 3 years. They don't have to do the full comprehensive. If you or a family member says, I would like to have a full comprehensive done, I would like for my child to be completely reevaluated to make sure that they have the appropriate eligibility, or to get more information, that is something that you can ask at the table. You can say that while the team is meeting to go over the data to see if there needs to be a new evaluation.
Can I just speak to that?
Yeah.
Just as a parent, for my own child, it was not determined that there needed to be another evaluation. But when he got to middle school, we decided, because it was middle school and he was changing, developmentally, that it was just a good time to sort of revisit everything. And so that's an example of the time that you might have that discussion at the team table.
Great. And I think, Anne, this next one's for you. The next question, are any of the courses you mentioned right from the start certified?
I think the only course that I mentioned was that module, and that's just, it's just a public module.
Oh, no, so sorry.
There's 2 questions in the chat before we answer that last one in Q&A.
Okay, let me jump over.
Our county will not delay the preschool evaluation if the student does not have hearing or vision or failed hearing or vision. What is your thought? Our county has audiologists on staff and several spot machines available.
You're saying that your county, I might need some clarifications. The county will not delay,
Our
so
county
they
will not.
move forward with the evaluation, or they are delaying the evaluation.
She said yes. First part.
They won't wait on the hearing and vision.
They move forward.
Okay. So, here's the thing. That is not, I would say that's not, best practice. However, if hearing and vision is not a concern, they need to evaluate. They can't wait 2 years trying to get the child into a hearing or vision evaluation. You said they have a spot checker, so they probably are using that for some kids. This may be just a situation where there are practices in the district and maybe you need to give me a phone call.
We will
Right.
provide that information at the end.
Information, yes, is provided. Ultimately, the moral of the story, or what I tell directors, is we don't want to be evaluating students for a specific eligibility category and then come to find out that they have a hearing loss or a vision impairment in 3 years. And now we've been educating them and we're saying they don't know how to read, or their speech is delayed, or they can't sound out words, when really it was just their hearing or vision. And we've missed that opportunity, and now we've waited 3 years, so they've missed opportunity. So we just want to make sure that we're doing what's best for kids, and that means that we have checked every avenue to make sure we're not missing something that's impacting their education. So feel free to give me a call. Maybe you already have. Yes. Okay. Now I'm not sure.
Can you please review the type amount of hearing loss that a school system considers when looking at possible eligibility for the DHH classroom? I know this is only one consideration.
So there are 2 things in that question that they're 2 separate things, I think. So there's not as a consider. There's not a DHH. There's not a DHH consideration for a classroom. That, as far as being in like a resource setting for specifically for students who are deaf or hard of hearing, that's an IEP team decision following eligibility. And that is going to be on that least restrictive environment continuum of services. So that is a team decision. Not necessarily, there's not really like a cutoff for that, because it's what the students need to access their curriculum. As far as an eligibility, thanks. Sorry, my computer decided that today was the day it was going to start dying quickly. As far as eligibility purposes, so what I would say to that is IDEA says any hearing loss, any level of hearing loss, whether fluctuating or permanent, if it's impacting education, the student is eligible. So what we are telling people in Georgia, because currently our Georgia board rules have a decibel level. So our board rules say decibel, hearing loss of 30 decibels to 70 is considered hard of hearing. I think 70 or more is deaf. What we are training on is, again, just like IDEA says, any level of hearing loss, if it's impacting education or it appears to be impacting education, you need to evaluate. The child may not be eligible. The child may not really need specially designed instruction. They may just need accommodations, but we need to be evaluating regardless of the level of hearing loss. There's a documented hearing loss, even if it's fluctuating, we need to be evaluating for that. So hopefully that answers that question. The classroom piece is an IEP team decision.
All right, last question, because we gotta wrap it up. Hot topics, right? IEP.
All right, so back to the question and answer.
Yeah, if a child,
If a child is deaf hard of hearing but qualified for the IEP at age 3 due to speech delays, then when transitioning to public kindergarten, will they have an IEP just based on speech, or will the DHH supersede the speech IEP? We've been told yes and no. So when the child's 3, they enter public school. There's not really a difference between public school or 3-year-olds and kindergarten. So that IEP will just kind of carry on with them. If they didn't get a DHH eligibility when they started at 3, they will have to if it's warranted and the team thinks that DHH needs to be looked at, which probably does if they have documented hearing loss, they'll need to be reevaluated. And that can happen at any time. That can happen when they're 4, that can happen when they're 7. But I would look at getting them reevaluated and having DHH added. You can have DHH and speech. It really doesn't matter which one is considered the primary eligibility. If speech is first and DHH is listed second, it doesn't really impact any services for the student. You don't need to reevaluate to say, I think this is first. That's a decision that can be made annually, but again, it doesn't impact anything for the student. If they only had speech, they can still get services, but I would look at the DHH eligibility piece to make sure they're really getting what they need relative to the DHH piece. So reevaluate if necessary. All right, so that is all of our questions. Thank you guys so much.
So much to you presenters. We have another session that's going to start at 3 o'clock. We're going to let you guys take a break so you can go potty and do